alright. This is Pack 365, myself Srija. So today in this session you're going to learn about the anatomy of adnexa. So what is adnexa? It is an accessory structure of the eye. So what are the accessory structures of the eye? So the adnexa, these are the structures that support, protect and assist the eyeball. So they include orbit, extraocular muscles, eyelids, conjunctiva and the lacrimal apparatus. So coming to the first part, orbit. So what is the orbit? It is a bony cavity in the skull that houses and protects the eye and its supporting structures. So what are the bones forming the orbit? So there are 7 bones which forms the orbit. Frontal bone, maxilla bone, zygomatic bone, ethmoid bone, sphenoid bone, lacrimal bone and palatine bone. So these form the boundaries and protection of the orbital cavity. So at the right side, this diagram, it highlights the bones which are present within the orbit of the eye. So frontal bone, you can see over here. So this frontal bone, it forms the roof of the orbit. Maxilla, it forms the floor. Next, zygomatic bone, this forms the lateral wall, which is the outer side. And ethmoid bone, which forms most of the medial wall. And next, lacrimal bone. This is a very small bone containing the lacrimal fossa, which is a tear drainage area. And then sphenoid bone. It forms the back wall of the orbit. It contains optical canal, which is the passage for the optical nerve, which is the second cranial nerve. And at last, you can find the palatine bone. So this is a small portion at the back part of the orbital floor. And you can also find this optical canal, and which carries optical nerve and also the ophthalmic artery. And superior orbital fissure, this is a nerve which helps in for eye movement. And also inferior orbital fissure. This is a nerve and vessels which arise from the maxillary region. So these are the bones which are present within the orbital of the eye. So what are the contents of the orbit? So the orbit is not just a cavity, it holds multiple important structures. So what are the multiple important structures? Eyeball, extraocular muscles, vessels, eye nerves, fat and lacrimal gland. So eyeball, it is the main structure of the visual system, right? Next, extraocular muscles. So there are 6 muscles that moves the eye, which are extraocular. Like there are superior rectus, inferior rectus, medial rectus, lateral rectus, superior oblique, inferior oblique. And also the vessels of the orbit are ophthalmic artery and ophthalmic vein. And there are nerves like second cranial nerve, optic nerve, third cranial nerve, oculomotor nerve, fourth cranial nerve, trochlear nerve, sixth cranial nerve, trigeminal branches, and sixth cranial nerve, abducens nerve. And coming to fat, it cushions and supports the eye, whereas lacrimal gland, it produces the tears. So these form the contents of the orbit. So next accessory structure is eyelid. So what are eyelids? Eyelids are the movable folds of the skin that protect and maintain the health of the eye. So what is the structure of the eyelid? Skin. First structure is the skin. It is the thinnest skin in the body. Like it allows the easy movement and blinking. Whereas muscle coming to orbicularis oculi, it is a circular skeletal muscle which is around the eye. Like it helps in blinking, tight closure and also protection. So this is mainly controlled by facial nerve, which is a 7th cranial nerve. And coming to tarsal plates, also called as tarsus. It is a dense connective tissue plates which is giving shape and firmness of the eyelids. So upper tarsal plate is larger, which supports the upper lid. And next structure is meibomian glands. So what are meibomian glands? These are located inside the tarsal plates. So what does they do? They secrete the oily layer of the tear film. So they prevent the tear evaporation. And in this function, it carries the dry eye and also the chalazion. So next, the last structure is conjunctiva, which is lining the inner surface. So this is a thin mucous membrane which is attached to the inner eyelid. So it helps to keep the eyelid surfaces moist and smooth. So what are the functions of the eyelid? Protecting the eye from injury. So eyelid, it protects the eye from injury, dust and insects from entering the eye. And also it helps in spreading the tears. So each blink it spreads tears evenly over the cornea, like it keeps it moist and clear. And it also helps in limiting the light entry, like partially closed lids reduces the light entering the eye. So what are the extra functions for the eyelids? Like it helps to remove debris with blinking. It also contains eyelashes to filter the light and dust, and also it maintains the tear film stability. So in the picture you can clearly see the eyelids over here and the eyelashes. So next coming to conjunctiva. So what is conjunctiva? Conjunctiva is a thin transparent mucous membrane which lines the inside of the eyelids, which lines the surface of the eyeball, and also it lines the fornix, which is a fold where palpebral and bulbar conjunctiva meet. So in the picture, you can clearly see the layers of the conjunctiva. Palpebral conjunctiva, conjunctiva fornix and bulbar conjunctiva. So these are the layers of the conjunctiva. And this is conjunctivitis, which is a pink eye, and subconjunctival hemorrhages. So conjunctivitis is nothing but inflammation of the conjunctiva, which is also called as pink eye, means the eye appears in pink color. So what are the functions of the conjunctiva? It lubricates the eye with mucus and tears. It also prevents the microbes from entering the deeper tissues. It provides the immune defense, which contains the lymphoid tissue, and also it helps the eyelids to glide smoothly during blinking. So subconjunctival hemorrhage is nothing but the small blood vessels are bursted, so which looks in bright red patch like color. So this looks scary, but usually they are harmless. So these are the parts as I shown you within the diagram. The palpebral conjunctiva. So this lines the inner surface of the eyelids, which is a smooth moist surface. This helps the eyelids to glide over the eye during blinking. And the next layer, the bulbar conjunctiva, it covers the sclera. Sclera is nothing but it's a white part of the eye, right? So this bulbar conjunctiva, it stops at the edge of the cornea, which does not cover the cornea. So this is very thin, so blood vessels visible, and this becomes red in conjunctivitis. And the third layer is fornix, which is a conjunctival fornix. So the junction or the transition area between the palpebral and bulbar conjunctiva is called as conjunctival fornix. So this acts like a fold that allows the eyelids to move freely without stretching the conjunctiva. So what are the functions of conjunctiva? Lubrication and immune defense. So what does the lubrication do? It secretes mucus and also tears to maintain a smooth, moist ocular surface. It also protects cornea from drying out. Whereas in immune defense, it contains the lymphoid tissue. So this provides the immune cells. It protects the eye from infections, dust, and also the allergens. So this is about the conjunctiva. And then coming to extraocular muscles. So what are extraocular muscles? So these are the muscles which control movement and alignment of the eyeball. So these are 6 in number. They allow the eye to move up, to move down, to move left, to move right, and also to rotate. So there are among 6, 4 are rectus muscles, whereas 2 are oblique muscles. So in the picture, you can clearly see the 6 muscles. So the 4 rectus muscles are superior rectus muscle at the top. So this moves the eye up, whereas inferior rectus muscle, this moves the eye down. So medial rectus muscle, it moves the eye towards the nose, nothing but adduction movement. Whereas lateral rectus, it moves the eye away from the nose, which is called as abduction movement. And there are 2 oblique muscles, which is inferior oblique and superior oblique. So this inferior oblique, it results in extorsion and it helps to look up and out. Whereas superior oblique, it helps in intorsion and it helps to look down and out. So this is about the extraocular muscles. So coming to innervation. So innervation, LR6S04, which is rest by 3. So lateral rectus, it is controlled by 6th cranial nerve. So this is the only muscle which is moving the eye outward. Whereas superior oblique, the Fourth cranial nerve is also called as the trochlear nerve. It is a special pulley-like muscle, and all other muscles like cranial third nerve, which is also called as ocular motor nerve. So this includes the superior rectus, inferior rectus, medial rectus, and inferior oblique. So whenever if a damage occurs to sixth cranial nerve, so what happens? It cannot abduct. So the eye cannot move outward. So the eye turns inward. Whenever damage happens to cranial nerve 4, so diplopia while looking down, for example like reading or stares. So this is due to superior oblique weakness. So next coming to lacrimal apparatus. So what is lacrimal apparatus? It is a system which is responsible for the tear production, distribution and drainage. So it means its main job is to keep the eye moist, clean, nourished and also protected. So what are the components of the lacrimal apparatus? Lacrimal gland. So lacrimal gland, what does it do? It is located at the upper outer part of the orbit. So here's a picture. You can see the anatomy of lacrimal apparatus over here, and here is the lacrimal gland, right? So what is this lacrimal? It is located at the upper outer part of the orbit. So this produces the tears continuously. So the tears contain water, electrolytes, lysozyme, lactoferrin, and antibody A for defense molecule. So this lacrimal gland is also called as the tear factory because it secretes tears, right? So next, coming to excretory ducts, which is also called as the lacrimal ducts. So these are the small ducts that carry the tears from the lacrimal gland to conjunctival sac. So what does they do? They spread the tears across the surface whenever you blink. So these are the delivery pipes for the tears. And then coming to lacrimal puncta. So these are the tiny openings on the medial side of the upper and lower eyelids. So they act as the entry points for the tear drainage. So these are the openings which suck the tears in like tiny vacuum holes. So next is lacrimal canaliculi, also called as canaliculi. So these are the small channels that connect the lacrimal puncta to the lacrimal sac. So this is in between the lacrimal puncta and also the lacrimal sac. So these tears move from puncta to canaliculi and then to sac. So these are also called as the tear drainage canals. So next is lacrimal sac, right? So this is located in the lacrimal fossa near the nose. It collects the tears before they go down into the nasal cavity. So this is a temporary tear reservoir. And next to lacrimal sac, there is a nasolacrimal duct. So this is the final drainage tube. So this carries tears from the lacrimal sac, which is inferior nasal meatus. What is the meaning? Which is present inside the nose. So this is why your nose becomes runny whenever you cry. So this is a tear flow pathway. Lacrimal gland next to excretory ducts, next to lacrimal puncta, next to lacrimal canaliculi, and then lacrimal sac, nasolacrimal duct, and finally nasal cavity, then to nose. So what are the functions of the tears? Lubrication. So tears, it keeps the eye moist and which prevents the dryness and friction. So it also helps in protection. Like tears contain lysozyme enzyme, which is an antibacterial enzyme, and antibody A, which has the immune function. So this helps to defend against the microbes. And also it functions for nutrition. It provides nutrients and oxygen to avascular cornea. And also it helps in cleaning and flushing the debris. Nothing but it washes away the dust, small particles, and also all the irritants. So this is about the lacrimal apparatus and the function of the tears. So next, so eye receives its blood from ophthalmic artery and it drains through ophthalmic veins. So understanding this is important in ophthalmology, neurology, and also coding. So how blood is supplied to eye? First, ophthalmic artery. So it's a main arterial supply to the eye. So this is a branch of the internal carotid artery. So it enters the orbit through the optic canal along with the optic nerve. And then central retinal artery, so which is a branch of the ophthalmic artery. So it enters the eye through the optic nerve. It supplies the inner retina, including the photoreceptors. It is also supply blood through vortex veins. So this drain, what does this vortex veins do? They drain the uveal tract, which is a choroid ciliary body or iris. So there are 4 to 5 veins which are located in the quadrants of the eyeball. They drain the blood from the middle vascular layer. So then superior and inferior ophthalmic veins. So these are the main veins which drains the orbit. They drain into cavernous sinus. So infections from face or orbit can spread to cavernous sinus. Okay. So next, how nerve supply is done to eye. So eye is controlled mainly by cranial nerves 2 to 7. So how does it supplies? So optic nerve, second cranial nerve. What is the function? Vision. So it carries the visual signals from the retina to brain. So what are the diseases relevant? Optic neuritis, glaucoma, and also optic atrophy. And next nerve is oculomotor nerve, which is the third cranial nerve. So this controls mostly the extraocular muscles. So they also controls the levator palpebrae, which helps in opening the eyelids. And also this helps in pupil construction through parasympathetic fibers. And then trochlear nerve, which is a fourth cranial nerve. What is the function? Superior oblique muscle. So this moves the eye down and in. So this is the smallest cranial nerve but has the longest intracranial course, which makes prone to the injury. And then fourth one is sixth cranial nerve, abducens nerve. So this moves eye laterally in the lateral direction, which is the movement called as abduction. So what happens when one is suffering through sixth cranial nerve palsy? So eye cannot move upward. It results in the horizontal diplopia. Okay. And then trigeminal nerve, V1 cranial nerve. It is also called as the ophthalmic division. So what is the function? Corneal sensation. Like it supplies sensation to cornea, conjunctiva, and the skin around the orbit. And the next is the facial nerve, which is the seventh cranial nerve. What is the function? It closes the eyelids, like orbicularis oculi, and also lacrimal secretion, which is a parasympathetic input to the lacrimal gland. And also the seventh cranial nerve palsy, which is also called as the Bell's palsy. That is, what is the condition? It is the inability to close the eye. So which results in the dry eye risk. So these are the nerves which help in nerve supply to the eye. So this is about the anatomy of adnexa. So now let's go into physiology of eye. So what are the functions of the eye? So the physiology of eye, it describes how the eye receives light, how it focuses it, how it converts into electrical signals and sends it to the brain to form the vision. So this also includes the mechanisms that maintain the eye health like clarity, pressure, protection, and also the homeostasis. So what is the physiology of the vision? So vision occurs through 4 main steps. So this slide, it covers the first step, which is the refraction of the light. So what is refraction? Refraction is nothing but it's a bending of light rays as they pass through the refractive media of the eye. So light enters the eye, then this light, it must be bent or focused, and then this land exactly on the fovea for the clear vision. So what is the refractive media of the eye? So there are 4 refractive media that bend the light. So the first one is cornea. So cornea, it's a main refractive surface of the eye. So what does this do? It contributes 70% of the focusing power. So this is a curved and always maintains its fixed shape to stable the refraction. So cornea, it is the most important refractive structure. So then aqueous humor. Aqueous humor, it is a clear fluid in the anterior and posterior chambers. So it provides some of the refractive power. It also maintains the intraocular pressure. So next is lens. Lens, it's a biconvex flexible and transparent structure. It also contributes to the accommodation. And accommodation means the lens changes its shape to focus on the objects at a different distances. Like in the case of near vision, the lens becomes more rounded. Whereas in the case of distant vision, the lens becomes flatter. So this is controlled by the ciliary muscle plus zonular fibers. So the fourth structure is vitreous humor. So vitreous humor is a gel-like material filling the vitreous chamber. So what does vitreous humor do? It helps to maintain the eyeball shape. It also assists in the light transmission towards the retina. So what is the final goal of the refraction? To focus the image exactly on the fovea centralis. What is fovea? It is a region in the retina with high density of the cones. So this is responsible for the sharpest and most detailed vision. So if light does not land on the fovea, it results in a blurry vision results. So this is how the refraction of light plays a role in the vision. And then accommodation of the lens. So accommodation means the eye adjusts the shape of the lens to focus on near or distant objects. So the lens cannot move forward or backward. So the ciliary muscles and the suspensory ligaments changes its shape. Now what is the mechanism of this accommodation? Near vision and distant vision. So near vision means looking at the something close. So in the case of near vision, what happens? It increases the lens curvature, which increases the focusing power. So what's the process over here? First, the ciliary muscle contracts. So this makes the zonular fibers loosen. So they become relaxed. And then the lens become more convex, maybe thicker or rounded. And then the refractive power increases. So because of this, the light bends more strongly, which helps to focus on the near objects. Remember, always remember, if there is a contracted ciliary muscle, it results in rounded lens and near vision. Whereas in the case of distant vision, what is the goal? To make the lens flatter to reduces the refractive power. Then what is the process? The ciliary muscle relaxes. So this makes the zonular fibers to become tense, nothing but pulling the lens, and then lens becomes flat, and then refractive power decreases, which is good for distant objects. So always remember, if the ciliary muscle is relaxed, it results in the flat lens in the distant vision. So this is controlled, this distant vision, it is controlled by the parasympathetic fibers of third cranial nerve. So this nerve, it controls both the ciliary muscles for accommodation and also the pupillary muscles. So next is pupillary regulation, which is also called as the light control. So the pupil, it adjusts to control the amount of light entering the eye. If there is too much of light, then pupil constrict. If there is low light, the pupil dilates. So what is pupillary constriction? It happens when there is a bright light or when focusing on the near objects. So what is the mechanism of a pupillary constriction? Sphincter pupillae muscle contracts and then pupil becomes smaller. So why it is important? Pupillary constriction, accommodation for near vision and also convergence together, they form the near triad. So this is controlled by parasympathetic system, also via the third cranial nerve. So pupillary dilation means the pupil becomes larger, so allowing more light to enter. So what is the mechanism over here? The dilator pupillae muscle contracts. So what does it do? This widens the pupil, resulting in the mydriasis condition. So how it is controlled? By sympathetic nervous system, by flight or flight nerve, so that the pupil dilates to increase the visual awareness. So what are the functions of the pupillary reflexes? Pupillary reflexes, they helps to regulate how much light enters the eye. So what are the main functions include? To protect the retina from the bright light. Nothing but constriction prevents the excessive light from damaging the photoreceptors. So it also increases the depth of the focus. So a smaller pupil, it acts like reducing the aperture of a camera so that the image becomes sharper. So these pupillary reflexes, they also aid in the accommodation. So whenever focusing on the near objects, the pupil constrict, lens becomes more convex, eyes converge, and together they form a clear image. So this is how the pupillary dilation mechanism works. So next is phototransduction. Light to electrical impulses. So this is the core function of the retina. So what is phototransduction? It is a process where the light is converted into electrical signals that the brain can interpret as the vision. So where does they occur? In the retina, mainly in the photoreceptors like rods and cones. So photoreceptors are nothing but rods and cones. What are rods and what are cones? Rods are the specialized for night vision. So these are approximately 120 million rods in each eye. So they are located in the peripheral retina. Very high sensitivity to light, and they also function well in the dim light. So they provide black and white vision, and also about the low visual acuity, which is not sharp. So rods are nothing but night vision plus peripheral vision plus high sensitivity. So coming to cones. So cones are the second major type of photoreceptor which are essential for the daylight vision. So what is the number of the cones? There are about 6 million cones in each eye, which are far fewer than the rods. So where they are located? Highly concentrated in the macula. So this is the densest in the fovea centralis, which is the point of the sharpest vision. So the fovea, it contains almost only cones, making it to center for reading, facial recognition, and also the color detection. So what is the function of the cone? These cones, they always work in the bright light, which is the phototopic vision. These are responsible for the color vision, sharp central vision, which is high acuity, and cones is nothing but color plus clarity, whereas rods is night plus peripheral vision. So these are about the photoreceptors, about the rods and cones. And then coming to visual pigments. So what are visual pigments? These are the light sensitive molecules which are inside the rods and cones. They are rhodopsin, photopsin. So what is rhodopsin? Rhodopsin is present in the, it is a visual pigment which is present in the rod. So rhodopsin is an extremely sensitive to low light. It helps with night vision. Whereas photopsin, these are present in cones. So there are three types for color vision. So what are they? Red sensitive cones, which has the long wavelength, green sensitive cones, which has the medium wavelength, and blue sensitive cones, which have the short wavelength. So combination of activation of these three types produces all the colors which we see. So next is the mechanism of the phototransduction. So what is the mechanism of the phototransduction? Which travels from light to nerve signal. So this is a step where light becomes an electrical signal the brain can understand. So let's break it down clearly. So what is the first step in the mechanism? The light hits the photoreceptor. So rods and cones receive the photons in this step. So the second step, the photopigment breaks down. So rhodopsin, which is present in rods, or photopsin, which is present in cones, they undergo a chemical change. This causes the hyperpolarization. So what do you mean by hyperpolarization? It's nothing but the cell becomes more negative. So light hyperpolarizes while the darkness depolarizes the photoreceptors. And then the third step is bipolar cell stimulated. So hyperpolarization, they changes the neurotransmitter to release, which results in the signals passed to the bipolar cells. And then the ganglion cells, they generate the action potentials. The bipolar cells, they stimulate the ganglion cells. So this generates the true action potential. So ganglion cell axons form the optic nerve. So what is the signal pathway to the brain? So light signal, it travels through optic nerve, then through optic chiasm, through optic tract, then lateral geniculate body, then primary visual cortex. So this pathway, it allows the brain to interpret the shape, color, motion, and the spatial orientation. So this is about the mechanism of the phototransduction. So that's it. This is for today's session. I hope this session has helped you. So in the next session, you're going to learn some more functions and physiology of the eye and its accessory structures. Thank you.